for us gamers, 8 a.m. is practically midnight the night prior, so we're hanging in there this morning.
Appreciate you waking up with us this morning or yesterday. So you look good. You're holding up through this whole crisis.
Yeah. It's normally I'd get out and go to the office, and that would kind of be, and go to the gym or whatever, and that kind of be my get out for the day. And you and probably anyone else knows now, my whole desk setup and everything's right next to my bed. So I get up and I sit in the same room, and then I have to like physically remove myself just to get out and do something different. But we're hanging in there. Everything's still flowing. Just taking some getting used to for sure.
That's good. Yeah, it's more of a mental shift than anything.
That's right.
It affects your body physically, but mentally, it's just you can't get out of bed.
No, you're right. It's
been difficult.
It's just a lot of time in the same place. So I think actually it's an interesting thing to look at, just trying to adapt to something totally new. Everyone's in these same routines for however long.
Yep.
And now this is thrown at us, and so people are adapting, certainly in different ways, but we're all hanging in there.
I'm excited to talk to you today on behalf of everybody listening and watching, because you get to do something unique, but it's even more so in my mind, and I don't know this factually yet, which I'm looking forward to you giving us some insight to, but I'm sure that your industry in esports has changed throughout this whole experience, especially with the absence of actual sports. So before we start, why don't I just get you to introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background on you and what you do, and we'll kind of lead in from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Hamilton pointed out to start the show, my name is David Olson, and I do commentary for professional esports. Our studio rather is based up in Alpharetta. I work for a company called High Res Studios, and they make the game, market the game, and then also we have a separate side studio building for producing all of the esports. So I went to college up at the University of Georgia for something entirely unrelated. I did information systems and minor in computer science, and I happened to meet a guy who had an internship there at the time. And it was actually kind of a funny story. Jokingly, one night we were back at my apartment, and they were playing Super Smash Brothers on our big projector screen. And I was always the type I could just sit back and watch my friends play and just kind of enjoy it that way. And so I jokingly started commentating over it. And I guess in the back of this guy's head, like it kind of stuck. And then eventually his internship turned into a job on the eSports side of the company. And then one year they said, hey, we need a guy to come in. So he said, I remember you were pretty good at this. You want to come in and give it a shot? And that was about a year and a half ago now at this point. Okay. So he brought me in. We did some test runs. They threw up old footage of the game on the screen, and I had to stand there and walk through the commentary aspect. And to this day, despite me, him, and nobody else sitting in a room, it's one of the most nervous I've ever been. But now I do commentary for both of our games, Paladins and Smite, and we've continued to roll on through all the home quarantine and all that.
What effect are you seeing on this industry based on people just spending a lot more time in their living rooms, in their bedrooms, wanting to be entertained?
Yeah.
I mean, you can see 50 people watching somebody else eat a hamburger. So it seems like folks are starving, no pun intended, to be entertained. Have you seen an uptick in what you guys do from the esports side?
Yeah, we absolutely have. Not that there's ever a good time for any of this to happen, because it's obviously horrible for a lot of places in the world. But in a business sense, there absolutely are upticks kind of on our side of things. Just this year, we released a system where viewers can build up points by watching that they can then move into game and spend on in-game items and things of that nature. And on a weekday, I don't know the exact specific numbers, but I know that we've seen maybe 1,000-2,000 viewer uptick from what we're used to around the same broadcast times outside of the scenario. And then even the games themselves. So our game called Smite, that one has been out. We just celebrated our 6th birthday of Smite a couple days ago. And just yesterday on Steam, computer video game library where you can go in and download all sorts of games. Just now, in 6 years of the game being out, reached its all-time player count. So after 6 years, more people were playing the game. I think it was Wednesday this week than they ever had been up to this point, 6 years. So in a weird way, there absolutely are upticks in this nature in the gaming esports side of things, because I mean, you look at Sports Center, ESPN, whatever it may be right now, traditional sports, I mean, they're starved for content. You know, they're really digging deep, trying to rehash topics, things like that. And in a weird way, seeing live competition is something that a lot of people still crave, and esports is able to still provide that.
I mean, it was one Saturday I was sitting in my house. This was months ago, pre-corona, pre-quarantine life.
Right.
And there was an esports event on. I turned it on because I think it was actually on ESPN or another sports network, and didn't really have a ton of interest in it.
Right.
I couldn't turn it off. I was like, what is this? You might know the game. I'm not sure. It was this giant arena, thousands of people in this arena watching teams from different cities compete in this game.
It might have been Call of Duty. They just moved to a franchise system. Yeah.
This was incredible. I mean, the folks that were in the stands cheering, it looked like a football game, a basketball game, but these guys were at a desk and they all had uniforms on and they were at their computers, and I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, it's $1 billion+ industry, I'm sure.
And it surprises a lot of people. So my company, we do online broadcasts anywhere. The games are played online for players who are remote, and then we get basically a replay file. We'll throw that up on our screen, and then we'll commentate over it and analyze it. But we also have a pro league, and that's really what's been affected by all this. So the top tier of play, we have players for Smite. They move from all over the world. We have players from Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Britain, Scandinavia, all over the place, some North American players. And once a year, they all move into houses. They have team houses in Alpharetta, Georgia. And they drive to the studio once a week. We have the big benches and cameras on them, and they play their games. And then they come backstage with us for post-game interviews. So it really is a whole big production. And then the minor leagues, the qualifying leagues, they just play it online. So that has been largely unaffected because we just, our production guys, similar to how Isaac is helping us with this, our production guys get the replay file, they load it up, and then, you know, in 4 hours from now today, I'll be sitting here at my camera and commentating over basically a Skype call with the game going. So it's a different look kind of in that aspect, but the pro league, you know, with people coming from all over the world, players coming from all over the world, we've had to kind of pump the brakes on that, which is kind of a bummer. Obviously, that's the highest level of play, and that's what we look forward to most of the time this year. But it absolutely surprises people that pro league. I think it's January of 2021. We will host a World Championships at the Cobb Energy Center, and that's our live event. So normally we're just in our studio. The players come into the studio. But we'll open the doors to thousands of people, and similarly to what you saw, the stands will be filled up, and they'll all be there watching these guys play. You know, largely they're just sitting there at a desk, and the game is being broadcast to a big old screen above them. But my parents came to Worlds this past year, and you know, they're obviously proud, knew I was doing something I loved, but couldn't quite believe that people would
there was a market.
Pay money. Right? It's wild, and it surprises a lot of people. But there absolutely is, and I think to your point, we're starting to see some of the strength really in those numbers when more people are kind of stuck at home with less to reach onto outside. Doors are absolutely being opened to more people looking into this whole new ecosystem, because I mean, we have 2 games out of hundreds in this esports thing, and there's something for everyone to watch, and I'm excited to kind of see the growth, even outside of coronavirus and the uptick that's brought. As an industry, it's growing anyway. So I'm excited to see, 1-2 years. Absolutely.
That's amazing. how long, and this is coming from a layperson that doesn't know anything about it, say that you were asked to commentate on a game, how long does it take you to know that game well enough to where you would be able to actually provide good commentary? That might be a stupid question. If there's a stupid question, just tell me if it's stupid.
No. It's actually a pretty spot on question, because all of last year, for a little bit more background, all of last year I only worked on our game called Paladins, and we had a separate commentary team for Smite, which is, I mean, viewers wise, a bigger game for us. So my first year, I was doing something still, I mean, important, but slightly less on the viewer and monetization side. So just this year, I got flipped over to doing Smite. So a game that I had played in the past, but not as heavily, obviously, as Paladins. I spent an entire year learning, getting up to date on Paladins. And then suddenly I had to learn Smite. And that took, I mean, probably 100 in-game hours to feel comfortable with the game. So I mean, just playing the game, and as sort of, maybe lame as that sounds, is that being work for a little while? I mean, it was work. I mean, that's a haul, because I'm in game trying to absorb every aspect of what's going on. I can't just mindlessly play at that point. And Smite is a game, it has, I think, 108 different characters at this point. All of the characters have 4 different abilities. There are hundreds of items that you can build. So Paladins, we were in the 40 to 50 range. They had three main abilities to kind of wrap my mind around. But Smite as a top-down view was so much more intricate. So sort of duration, I would say it took me about 100 in-game hours to feel comfortable just knowing like character names and item names and things like that, because I can't be up there commentating and saying the incorrect thing or incorrect name or whatever it may be out of nowhere. And I'm still kind of in that learning phase. It's very much a ramp, as my boss would call it, and I'm definitely on the incline. But there's also kind of a side thing. It's the comfort when I'm in game. It's one thing to know all the characters and know the items and know how the game works, but then there's also just the comfort where in Paladins right now I can kind of lean back. I know what's important. I know what's not important. And I can engage my co-commentator, bring up topics that are relevant. In Smite, I've gotten to that point, and I'm still getting there. But like when I first started, I was staring at the screen, saying every little thing that I possibly could see. I was overthinking it. So even when you know the game, knowing how it's played at the top level, because I'm middle of the road when it comes to player base in that game. But it took probably 100 hours of in-game time, and then we did, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 like practice reps where they would just put on an old game, and I would sit there with a more experienced Smite commentator, and we would just work ourselves through it. And now we're in full swing of things. So every week, I get 10 games or whatever to cast. But it takes a little bit of time. I mean, there's definitely an underlying foundation of just commentary, I guess I would say, just being able to converse, pull something out of nowhere if there's a lull in the game and not much is going on. Just the ability to kind of quickly adapt, I think, is just a baseline. So if I were thrown a new random game right now, I'd have to spend more time familiarizing myself than I would working on my commentary, if that makes sense. But it takes a good bit of time, especially with a game like Smite, as in-depth as it is. Game knowledge is kind of king in Smite. So that was something I was worried about, because if you say one thing wrong, the 1,000 people that are watching will let you know.
They know.
So I had to spend some time, but we're absolutely getting there.
That's awesome. What makes a good esports game? Do all games make good esports games, or is it only certain games that really translate well to being watched and being commentated on? That's the $1 million question, I think. I think any game can have a market for esports if at its core it's a good enough game and people like to play it. So I kind of look at it in 2 different routes, where I think you could get a lot of viewers on a game if it's just exciting by nature, if it makes sense as almost a virtual sport,
And also, if even if it's not quite as great a game or great viewership wise, if there are people who just like the game, they'll watch it anyway at the highest level. So I almost look at card games, maybe equate those to live poker, if you will. There's tons of these virtual card games, and they get tons of viewers because so many people play those games. Whether they're the most exciting thing in the world to watch, that's certainly up to a matter of opinion. But I think a more universal game, you may have heard of CounterStrike, and that's like a first-person shooter type game. Their major events get millions of viewers. In a game like that, sort of to answer your question more specifically, a game like that, and even a game like Smite, kind of on two different sides of the coin, and Paladins as well. CounterStrike is made up of 15 different rounds, and teams go back and forth 15 rounds over and over. And I love something like that because there are small stories within the bigger story almost. There's the whole game of the 15 rounds, and you've got, or 30 rounds, and you've got to win 16 of them to take the game. And then there's the smaller story. It's almost given to you on a silver platter. Round one is its own story, round two is its own story, so on and so forth. You look at a game like Paladins, and it's first team to 4 points wins that map, and then you play a different map and try to win the set. And I think that has a pretty good esports draw as well, because you get the story of the entire set of all the maps these teams have to play, and then you get to watch how sort of their character selection and all of that unfolds in game. So I really think in order for viewership to be viable is not the right word, because I think really anything could be viable in gaming at the moment, depending on the game itself's player base. I think having almost built-in storylines absolutely helps with something like that. So a game where you can easily tell when you're in a small moment or a big moment, I think is very important. And it also helps, and this is sort of a touch on our pro league, when you have teams and players that you can really care about. We have players in our league, in the Smite Pro League. We'll show up to the World Championship event, and people will have painted their bodies with like the name of the player. PBM Polar Bear Mike is one of the guys' names. So last year at Worlds, there were 3 guys, shirtless, painted up in purple, the color of his team, and that PBM across their 3 chests. And
wow,
it's something just to, it's one thing to get invested in the game just because you like the game. Another thing, if the esport is just so exciting, that the moments they make are big and exciting. And then there's a whole nother thing where a specific gaming organization maybe you really enjoy, or specific players maybe you really enjoy to watch. That can absolutely drive viewers as well. So I think I say it's the $1 million question, because lots of companies are still trying to kind of hammer that down exactly. But in my opinion, it needs to be kind of fast-paced, but also segmented enough where viewers can take a break every once in a while. You can clearly maybe follow the storylines that are going on, and that's a whole nother conversation. That relies on the commentators to kind of tell the story and things like that. But I look at a game like CounterStrike, easily the most viewed esport in the world right now. They get millions of viewers on their major events, and they do it right, and that's just by nature of the game. You get these small segments within a bigger story, and then the action in the game itself is fast-paced and exciting and intricate. Big moments, small moments, it all kind of builds into one story.
It might actually have been CounterStrike that I was watching that day.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, CounterStrike would make sense. Call of Duty, they just moved to like a franchise model where they have cities pick up Call of Duty teams. So Atlanta has a team called the FaZe, or the Atlanta FaZe, and every team hosts like a home weekend where all the other teams will fly to that city and they'll play games there. But CounterStrike, not surprising at all. Easily the largest. I say the largest. I can't say that as a firm statement, but I would put my money on it being probably the most viewed and one of the most attended esports in the world. And they do it right, and it's a different system from what we run at high res. And I think this is an interesting topic where there's kind of two different ways that people will run their leagues, where our company, we make the game, and then we also host a year-long league where teams will play each other a couple of times a year. They'll build up standings, and then by the end of the year, we move into playoffs, and then those playoffs culminate in the World Championships at the end of the season. Or you look at a game like CounterStrike, where they don't necessarily have a league in a traditional sports sense. They have individual tournaments once every few months. And so in our side, you'll be able to tune in more similar to like football. Hey, team rival plays today. Let's tune in and see who they're playing and watch how the standings change. In a game like CounterStrike, I got to go without CounterStrike for a month. There's this one weekend where all the best teams in the world are playing in this tournament. I've got to tune in and watch. So, I mean, there's absolutely two different ways that people look at it. But CounterStrike, they draw a crowd, they draw an audience. And it's not surprising. I mean, I think similarly to how we just hit our all-time player count at High Res and Smite the other day, CounterStrike, I think they've been on for 10 to 15 years is what CounterStrike has been. And they just hit, I think, their peak at 1 million plus active users on one specific day. And that's a game that's, double digits years old. So not surprising if it was CounterStrike that you happen to catch.
Yeah, that's insane. I'm not a big gamer. One of the only games that I've actually purchased was the Assassin's Creed, which is the American Revolution one.
Yeah.
Which to me, the storyline, that and Call of Duty World at War. And so those two, the reason why I bought the games were for the storyline. Everything else was, secondary to that. So it's interesting that you say the action, the storyline, and then the character personalities are kind of that trifecta of what makes a good esports game. And we're a marketing firm. I know you guys make the game, you market the game, you commentate on the game. What does that look like once you have the game ready to roll out? How do you roll something like that out? How do you get people to know your game exists, much less to play it, much less to watch someone else play it? I mean, step me through that.
So another a pretty spot on question for what we have going on. We later this year, I don't think I can say the exact date that it's all coming out, but we're working on a game called Rogue Company. It's fully been announced, but it's in alpha right now, so it's still in early testing. The game is put together, but we're sending it out for public testing. They give us feedback. We make changes on that. We'll go into a beta, which is a little bit more complete, but still requires some tweaks here and there. We'll send that out one more time, get user feedback both internally and externally. So we'll send it just to the general public and see what they think about it. And then we'll package it all back up, spend a few months really polishing it. And then later on, maybe towards the end of this year, fully release it. Hasn't been specified yet, but that's kind of the timeline and what we look at. And we've already announced that for that game, hasn't even come out yet. Some players have gotten their hands on it, again, for just testing purposes. But we've already announced that it'll have full esports support from the company. And sort of how that looks is the guy who got me into it, he made a transition over to Rogue Company this year as their head of esports. So right now, from a business standpoint or from a more development standpoint, he is working with the development teams. He comes over to the studio side and works with the broadcast teams to talk about what you would want to see in a spectator. So the view that the camera will see when you're watching the game. If you don't want to just be stuck on one player perspective the entire time, what scores do you want to see on the screen, things like that. So he's already at work, 6, 8, 10 months away from game release, working on what you'll want to see on the screen, how things should look, how things will look. So those wheels are already turning on that side. And then sort of the first thing for us is really just driving interest in the game. And, High Res as a company has hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter. Smite the game has, I think 1.5 million followers on Twitter. Paladins has a few 100,000 followers on Twitter. So as of right now, it's really using the existing platform of the company. People who play high-res games follow those accounts, and we use those accounts to sort of push out marketing around the game, get eyes on it, build interest. Just yesterday, we released the first gameplay trailer. So some cinematic things interspliced with somebody back in the company playing the game, and then we recorded their screen and kind of put it in to just give the players an idea of what it looks like. Because up to this point, it's all been animated characters kind of telling a little side story, but no in-game footage. So yesterday we built a little interest, and it's sort of that continual ramp up towards release where we've released some keys out to the public, the keys being what it takes to get into the game and play it a little bit and test it. So it's all about using the existing platform, driving interest, just to let people know the game exists. Because as a company, we're known for Paladins and Smite and Realm Royale and all the games we've made. So we have that existing platform to let people know about new games. But on the eSports side, that's the strategy that my friend Nick, the head of eSports for Rogue Company, will really have to look at. And I think that it's one of those things where the game, I think, and I've played it, and it's so much fun. And I think it's one of those things that it's going to be, and hopefully will be, a good enough game where people will watch it anyway, just because of the nature of the game. But also it's a sort of tactical shooter type game. Actually, not too dissimilar from the feel of maybe a CounterStrike. Mm-hmm. So really, I think what it looks like is you get a large player base. They're playing the game, and then through maybe in-game marketing, this is something we started doing this year with Smite. You put a panel in the game itself that says eSports, and then you click on it, and it takes you to a page, and it says, hey, our Pro League is going on this week. Click this link to go watch the stream. So if there are players who don't watch eSports, but they see the little live token in the bottom of their screen when they log onto the game, they're more likely to maybe transition over. So it's actually not too dissimilar from just maybe marketing a new product where you're just trying to get as many eyes on it as possible right out of the gate.
Yep.
And then the interest and the enjoyment of the game sort of at its core will draw people to want to get good at it. And then enough people will get good at it. We, maybe bring them in. One of the sort of favorite approaches, not even our company, but a lot of companies will use is like an open tournament system just to start it off. Like, it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense before we know the players, who's good, who's bad. I mean, especially early on, right when the game comes out, to, build a whole league around this game when you don't know player A from player B. I mean, there's going to be a lot of people playing, who's good, who's bad, and those sorts of things. So realistically, I mean, none of this is confirmed, but what our company might do, and what a lot of companies do when new games come out, is host maybe an open tournament. We put out a link and say, hey, sign you and your friends up for this tournament, and we'll cast your games and things like that. And then you start to see those top players week after week after week in those tournaments. And then eventually, right, absolutely. And it sort of fleshes itself out that way. So I think when a game first comes out, from a marketing and esports perspective, I think it's just important that it's a fun game to watch. And then us as commentators and producers on the line, just making it an enjoyable experience to watch. Because if you can get those first few people that say, hey, this is a new game, I want to see what it looks like, to then latch on and come back next time because it was an enjoyable time, they'll keep coming back time after time after time. So that one's been a fun one to follow within the company, because it was really my first game to really watch. I came in last year, so in a video game life cycle, it's about halfway through. The 2-3 years is kind of what you look at for a game development. But that was really my first example, and still continues to be my first example of a game from start to what will be finish, how it gets built up, how it's marketed, and it's been very interesting. So a lot of it's just using existing platforms and then hopefully delivering a product that just by its nature will keep those players latched on and wanting to compete.
I could have a whole nother 30 minutes asking you questions that are just bouncing around my head. I wish we had time. Maybe we'll have you on for another part when the game gets closer to its release. I'd be remiss to not mention my girlfriend Alex and her friend group, of which you're a part of, which is the reason why we're even having this podcast today. So I think she's in the living room. We're at her parents' house right now, seeking shelter in the corona. But you got a great friend group. I'm very thankful to be a part of that group now by association, and to have this time with you today. So I appreciate your time. How can they get in touch with you, viewer-wise, listener-wise, Instagram handle, whatever, to
Sure.
to continue the conversation, to see what you guys are working on. It could be yours, it could be high res. You let us know.
Yeah. Me personally, Twitter is absolutely the platform that most, I guess, personalities and then also game companies use. So myself, Dolson Live, first initial, last name, and then Live. That's my Twitter handle, and then the company is just at High Res Studios. And then if you look up Smite or Paladins or Rogue Company, you'll be able to find the account for all those games. And we're constantly updating. We have our Pro League for Paladins today, and then Smite is Friday through Sunday. So if it's something you're interested in, just twitch.tv, mixer.com, and you'll be able to tune in and get some live competition for you in these quarantine days.
Make sure you're quenching that thirst for
right.
for competition there. So, David, I really appreciate your time this morning and for joining us here.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
More than entertaining, more than intriguing and informative. So opens up a lens into a whole different world for a lot of folks. So we appreciate it. For everybody joining us this morning, listeners, viewers, we sure are glad that you joined us here in the jungle with David Olson. Until next time, I'm Hamilton Winter, strategist with Liger Partners, and we'll see you later.